Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. If you're into fringe conspiracy theories, and of course that's a good portion of what's on the internet, you've no doubt heard of Nibiru before, also known as Planet X. Now, Nibiru, of course, is the name of an alleged rogue planet, Planet X, beyond Pluto, that is on a collision course with Earth. The idea was born from Zecharia Sitchin's ancient aliens theories. If you're a Fringe Pop 321 watcher, and of course you should be, you know we've devoted an episode to that topic specifically before, the whole idea of Planet X and Nibiru. And, not surprisingly, it's bogus. Well, as rogue planets cycling through our solar system are wont to do, Nibiru is back on our radar. This time we're here to talk about the idea that the impending collision of Planet X or Nibiru is, you guessed it, in the Bible. Isn't everything in the Bible? So here we are. Let's find out though whether this is true or not. Does the Bible give it any authority, or is it, like it was before, just plain bogus? Now the first thing that should have popped into your head is, where does the Bible talk about something like a rogue planet about to crash into Earth? Well, that's a good question. I could ask it this way. What's everybody's favorite book to find the zaniest, most bizarre ideas out there? Well, you got two choices. It's either Genesis or the book of Revelation. And if you chose the latter, you get a gold star for the day. The short answer is Revelation. Now, the New Testament book of Revelation is a book about the end of the world as we know it, so hey, that's a good fit. Even if you've never read a word of the Bible, you've likely heard of the Antichrist, the beast, and his mark, the number 666. There's more to Revelation's portrayal of the end of days, though, than those two things. There are numerous natural disasters, and the worst of those is likely what's mentioned in Revelation 8, 6 through 11. We read this: "The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter." And that was Revelation 8, 6 through 11. The presumed connection between Planet X, Nibiru, and of course the Bible is, for some, this passage, the devastation of the falling star known as Wormwood. Now take note, Revelation 8 describes a star called Wormwood crashing to the earth and poisoning its water supply. Death on a massive scale ensues. The falling star idea is going to become important in our discussion, though. Now, to cut to the chase here a little bit, and of course to make you watch the earlier episode of Fringe Pop 321, in that earlier episode we saw that the idea of a rogue Planet X or Nibiru is a fabrication, and I do mean a fabrication. We directed viewers to Pseudo-Astronomy's podcast where the idea is debunked scientifically or astronomically. We also drew on my own work in Mesopotamian literature. Remember the whole idea of Nibiru, that's a Mesopotamian term, being this rogue planet that cycles through the solar system every 3,600 years. That's supposed to come from cuneiform tablets. But in our earlier episode, we actually looked, and lo and behold, they never say that. Nibiru is never a term used of a planet beyond Pluto. There's no tablet that ever has Nibiru cycling through our solar system every 3,600 years. Nibiru is something annual, according to Mesopotamian astronomers. It's associated with Jupiter or Mercury or some other celestial crossing event. Again, we're not going to repeat all that material here in the detail we did in the earlier episode. You can watch that episode and check out the research material on the associated webpage for all of the data. There's a lot of data to back up what we're saying here, that Nibiru as a rogue planet beyond our solar system is a myth. The rest of our time here, we want to talk about the ancient context of the Bible's mention of wormwood and falling stars, because that's just as important. The original audience for the book of Revelation, for that passage we just read, would have had a very different understanding than this idea that the earth is going to get hit with some sort of planet in the future. As we begin to think about this a little bit more, I have a shocking proposal. Rather than relying on claims of ancient aliens theorists to interpret the book of Revelation, it might be wiser to read the first century book in light of its own first century historical and literary context. I know that's radical, but that's what I'm going to propose. As it turns out, there is indeed another way to read that passage in the book of Revelation and to understand the meaning of wormwood. In ancient literature in the centuries preceding and contemporary with the New Testament, falling stars were a familiar way, I would say a stock way, to describe the rebellion or descent into sin of heavenly beings. You might want to consider them fallen angels. This is because people in antiquity thought of celestial objects in the sky as angels or gods or animated in some way. The stars changed positions each night, the moon did as well, the sun moved across the sky, and it created the impression to the ancients that they were living beings. This idea lasted into the Middle Ages. There's actually an excellent scholarly history of this idea entitled Origin and the Life of the Stars by Alan Scott. Origen was a very famous early Christian thinker who lived a couple centuries after the book of Revelation was written. Original readers of Revelation's wormwood description would therefore quite readily have been thinking of fallen angels. So to read a description of wormwood as a falling star come to earth, to them would have suggested a supernatural rebellion or some kind of unleashing of supernatural hostile powers of darkness. They would not have been thinking of comets or meteors or a rogue planet for sure. The point is that wormwood may be a spiritual event or concept, not a literal astronomical one. Now let's think about the ground we just covered. I've suggested that to an original reader in the first century, fallen star language would, in their head, trigger the thought of a fallen angel, some sort of supernatural rebellion, or again, this idea of all spiritual, supernatural hell being released on earth. They would not be thinking of planets. So in addition to that context, we should also note something interesting about the term wormwood. Now, wormwood is an English translation of the Greek term absinthos. The line in Revelation 8:11 literally reads, "The name of the star is absinthe." Now, absinthe is the name of a bitter herb. It's interesting to note that in all of the texts and records of ancient Greco-Roman astronomy, I'm going to say that again, all of the texts and records of ancient Greco-Roman astronomy that have survived to this day, and there are a lot of them, in all of that material, there isn't a single instance where any actual star in the heavens was called absinthe. None of them. Now, this suggests very strongly that the ancient writer was not thinking about an astronomical object when he used that particular term that we translate as wormwood. So does Revelation 8 prophesy about Earth's impending destruction caused by a rogue planet, Nibiru or Planet X? There's simply no evidence for that, astronomically or, as we've seen, textually. Thanks again for watching Fringe Pop 321. Please visit our website for more information about this episode and other episodes, and of course, primary and secondary sources for the things we talk about here. And please come back and watch again, because what you know may not be so.